Welcome to Going In Blind. I'm your host, Zach Tidwell, and today I'm speaking with former Navy SEAL and two-time Bronze Star recipient for actions taken during combat, Monty Heath. And to everyone at home, thank you for listening. Please take a second to help me grow the show so that I can keep delivering these conversations week after week for years to come. Subscribe, rate, and review the show in whatever podcasting app you're using right now, and check out the show notes to follow me on social media and YouTube as well. When you share your favorite episodes, tag me and use the hashtag GoingInBlind. You can also join my mailing list at zachtidwell.net. And if you know someone you think I should talk to, have them send me an email at contact.goinginblind@gmail.com. Mr. Monty Heath, welcome to the show, man.
Thanks for having me.
I'm glad we were finally able to do this. And I think, I mean, we had talked beforehand. I'm sure this will probably be the longest episode that I've done yet. So I've got all sorts of stuff that I want to dig into with you. So to give everyone else a little bit of context before we start doing that, would you mind introducing yourself a little bit? Because you could probably do it better than I can.
Sure. Monty Heath, grew up in New England. Didn't know what I wanted to do until I saw that movie Navy SEALs with Charlie Sheen, the super cheesy one. And I realized that's exactly what I wanted to do. Joined the delayed entry program. My mom almost wouldn't sign for me. I got her to sign for me, I was 16. So delayed entry program, die-fair program, which meant I had guaranteed orders to SEAL training, buds, went to boot camp, went to an A school, got to buds, didn't make it straight through. Took me about a year to get through. Went to the East Coast, Team 2, this was mid-90s, and had a great time. And went overseas and did some things that were okay, but I saw what other guys were doing, and I asked, who are those guys? And they said, well, that's NSWDG. So I did my 5 years at 2, went over to NSWDG, and the towers fell. So I was in training, and we finished up like a month later. So another colored team went in first. I got in there second. Winners of 0, 2, 3, and 4. And then went back to Bosnia one last time to sort of close the loop, and we can talk about more of that, talk about that later if you want, but kind of sealed my career up. Got out, got into defense contracting, got into executive protection. Had no meaning, sort of chased the money and didn't have any meaning, so went out west and found some meaning with a nonprofit. Volunteered my time up north with the Special Olympics skiing program. So I was a Special Olympics ski instructor. And that's really what changed me, working with those kids, working with kids with Down syndrome, from an arrogant, cocky, SEAL that wanted to beat people up to actually wanting to help people, like literally. I just never, who helps people with Down syndrome and who takes them skiing? Because if I didn't, and if somebody doesn't, nobody will. So that got me into, more heady stuff and like meaningful stuff. It got me into working with veterans with PTSD and traumatic brain injuries and military sexual trauma, which is a whole nother topic. Did that for like 5 years, and then another 5 years with another nonprofit. So basically for about 10 years, I was in the nonprofit space with veterans and first responders. Did all sorts of things, rode my bike across the country to fight against veteran suicide, and doing EP again now, and doing contracting again now, working with my old teammates, which is fun. It's kind of interesting because I'm like twice their age. But
Oh, these are like new. Okay, I'm curious
well,
to ask you about
I'm
that.
49 years old, so
Yeah,
you could be a SEAL at 20, and I could be their dad. It's weird.
yeah. I guess I just because you had told me that you were working with. You'd hinted at that, and I assumed
Yeah.
like these were guys that you served with, not guys that are
No,
like
heck no. The guys I serve with are all out. I mean, they're all
okay,
like E9s, O6s
just
are out.
crusties or yeah, have
Yeah, I
moved
mean, I
on.
was in 93 to 04, so I've been out quite a while now. And so I do speaking engagements. I get paid to speak, which is odd because I'm an introvert and I don't like to speak, and I was never really into speaking or conversations or any of that. So that's all kind of 10, 15 years new for me. And that brings you up to speed, man.
All right. Yeah, that was I was expecting you to be like, yeah, former Navy SEAL, I've been an entrepreneur and done these other things. So that's, I mean, that touches on a ton of the things that I want to get into. But I've done my research on you and we've talked offline a little bit. And I think I was very interested in starting with because I think with when everyone thinks of a Navy SEAL, you I think the thought is probably all right, on top of mentally being a freak to be able to make it in that world and even get your foot in the door in that world, you've also have to be a biological specimen physically. And I'm curious, I mean, it sounds like you were a stud swimmer growing up and at least in high school, and then definitely had some probably like the mindset that allowed you to become a SEAL. But can you speak to that in terms
Well,
of,
yeah, I mean, yes to most of that, but you don't have to be a biological specimen to be a SEAL. You absolutely do not. The standards are pretty simple in terms of running and swimming and push-ups and pull-ups and sit-ups. And then when you get to buds, there's O cores and there's timed runs and there's timed swims, but you don't have to be a triathlete to pass. In fact, I know some people that never swam a day in their life, picked up swimming just enough to pass the test and went to buds and basically learned how to really swim in buds. It wasn't easy for them and they failed a bunch of swims, but the point is you don't have to be a biological specimen. There are definitely commonalities with seals, but not body wise. Everything from tiny and skinny to big and chunky. As long as you can pass the time runs, you could be a big chunky guy. But there is there is a baseline of mental strength, grit, discipline, all the things that keep you from quitting. So when you get through buds and you don't quit Hell Week, it is a hell of a standard that is set, and it is a hell of a baseline that all SEALs have, which is it's wonderful to be around.
well, and I mean, I would imagine that only gets honed more and more as you start to continue on through schools and the extra training that you guys go through. But that's because I've heard guys talk about that before, not other SEALs, but like Force Recon Bubbas and stuff like that talk about, yeah, none of it, you don't, every once in a while you might get a freak athlete in there, but a lot of it's just normal dudes that are just have this unparalleled grit outside of those communities. But I, I'm curious because it sounds when I've listened to your some of your other interviews and you talk like it sounds pre-enlisting, especially in high school, as you were kind of becoming a stud swimmer, like you had a chip on your shoulder, and it sounds like I would imagine that's kind of necessary to even be in that environment, and probably so I'm curious if, and when I say in that environment, in the SEALs, and that a lot of you guys are probably, I mean, I think you probably have to be high strung to even make it there. But I think with that, you already had that basis mentally to become and reach the level of becoming an elite swimmer. But you've also talked about having a really hard home life, and I'm curious if you think that that's played into any of that and that development process, both on the side of grit and having the chip on your shoulder.
Yes, for sure. First of all, I do think most SEALs, or probably Spec Ops guys in general, do have a chip on their shoulder, do have some childhood trauma, do have some, things to fight through, demons to fight through, things to prove to themselves or others, whether that matters or not is another topic. But I did have a chip on my shoulder, and I did not have a home life that I loved, and I think it absolutely was a part of my story. It helped me. It's never awesome to go through trauma as humans, but once you make it through the other side and you realize it didn't kill you, and you can use it, and you don't use it as a crutch. For example, just because your father didn't treat you well doesn't make it okay for you to have bad behavior, but it sure seems that way, or it seems like it's okay until you're in your like early 20s or so, right? But yeah, chip on the shoulder for sure. Things to prove for sure. And, not being happy at home probably helped me quite a bit. I left at 18. I never came back. I never asked for a dime. I never lived with my parents again. And, I've been on my own ever since.
So because you went to Buds straight out of high, I mean, you just said you
Yeah.
joined at 18, right? Okay.
Yeah, I was in Buds at 18 and turned 19 and left while I was 19.
And I meant to ask you this when you touched on other guys like failing some of the swims and stuff earlier, because I'd never thought about that before. When in terms of that stuff, as you're going through Buds, and I'll try not to just sit here and harp on Buds, but I was curious when you brought this up. Uh, like if you're failing these tests and things like that, so long as it's not you being just out of shape and you're not quitting, will they let you keep cycling back through in those classes?
Yeah, you can get rolled for performance for things like that if you're a good guy. They'll
Okay.
definitely roll you, and you'll just have to suck it up and restart. However far you made it into first phase, for example, is irrelevant because you're going to have to restart and do everything again. So yeah, good guys they'll keep. If they don't think you're putting out and they don't think you're putting out, effort, and you're failing, then you're not going to get another chance. So it's a little bit subjective, but the instructors are pretty good on picking up on who the good guys and who the slackers are.
Okay. And so you come out of Buds, and because you mentioned you had the dive, I don't know what was the dive fair.
Dive dive fair, yeah.
So had you already been to an MOS school at that point?
That was part of it. I just had to pick one,
Oh,
and I
okay.
picked I picked Corman.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah.
So you come out of Buds, you become a corpsman. What's the pipeline until you actually hit the teams? I mean, because you're just that's your foot in the door.
Yeah. Now it's a little bit more streamlined, but and it was pretty similar back then as well. But basically, you get through buds, you go to jump school, whatever other schools you got to go to. Usually, it's just jump school, and then you show up to your team, and you spend some time with your platoon, and then you get your trident. That was back when I did it. Nowadays, they do buds, which is like 6 months, and then they do SQT training, which is like SEAL qualification training. That's another 6 months or so, and then they're given their trident, and then they show up at their team with their trident. So that's a little bit different, but it's about a year. It's at least a year to 2 years of pipeline.
Wow. Did you have to sign up for was your initial contract more than 4 years because of that?
It was 4 and 4, so it was 4 active and 4 inactive.
Okay. So you make it through all that. You get to SEAL Team 2, you said,
Yep.
right? And
Yep.
then you mentioned Bosnia. Is that what you were
Yeah, so
saying?
I did a little deployment to Bosnia, and we were taking guys, PIFWICs, persons indicted for war crimes, and we were flying them up to The Hague to stand for crimes against humanity. And but somebody else was like taking them out of their homes and ripping them out of their homes and turning them over to us, and we just did a little plane ride. And I was like, "Well, who are those guys ripping them out of their homes?" And they told me who it was, and I didn't know much about them. And so then that's when I started to work towards that. To get to that command, NSWDG, you have to do 5 years at a normal team, and then you have to put your package in and put your name in. And so you put your name in, and that is circulated. Your name is circulated around the command, and they have the chance to give you the thumbs up or the thumbs down. And if they give you a thumbs down and they have a good reason, you'll never step foot in that command. So you do that. You do
Wow.
the psych eval, which is like 400 questions of like, do you think about flowers and do you like flowers and what do you think about blue flowers and how about red flowers? And you're like, what is this nonsense? And I don't know if they're just trying to test to see if you can not lose your temper, maybe. But you pass the psych eval, and then you have a board, a bunch of chiefs, and they ask you a bunch of questions, and then you get selected and you go to green team, and you're there for like 6 months. It's pretty darn difficult. Totally different than buds. Buds tests your grit, your resolve, your resiliency, and there's not a lot of skills. It's very, very, you don't really learn much in buds. But by green team, you have to be good at everything, and you have to be damn good in the house and damn good at skydiving, and the rest is kind of easy. But those two big blocks of CQB and skydiving get the most guys sent away.
Wow. And so you submitted your name and made it.
Yep.
Okay. And then this was all still pre 9/11.
This was 2001. Yeah. So I
Wow.
started in the spring of 2001, and we finished in like late October or early November.
Wow. Basically right after the towers had fallen.
Yep.
And so did you get kicked overseas immediately
Yeah,
after that?
I went to my team, and another team had already deployed, and we deployed next. So I trained until like January, and then we got over there in January. Pretty interesting over there the first time. The base, Bagram was there was basically nothing there. It was just an old Russian base. And when I went back there the third time, there was like a Burger King, some other fast food joint, like a PX. It was like a little mini base.
Yeah, I mean, I've heard that it was basically it's built up like a small little American city,
Yeah.
basically. Like
Yeah.
it's insane. I between so I get by this point when that first deployment, are you married and do you have a family already at that point?
I got married in '03, so I did a bunch of deployments before I got married. Didn't want to really get married, didn't want to have kids in the teams, and then got married, did one or two more deployments to Afghanistan and Bosnia, and then got out. Still have the same wife, and have two boys, and they're 17 and 19.
I would imagine still having the same wife there is probably the the rarity out of out of your
Yeah,
peers.
yeah, it is, and it's not because it's easy. I can tell you that, but yeah, the divorce rate's like I don't know 93% or so at that command. It's not easy.
Just I mean the op tempo is just constant.
Yeah, op tempo, just traveling everywhere. Guys drink and party and chase tail, and that doesn't really mix with being married. And some guys take forever to figure that out. Some guys figure that out sooner than later. But if you want to stay married, you gotta keep it to yourself.
Yeah, I'm always curious. Like with that, you guys have managed to make it through all of that and other some horrific circumstances with one of your sons that I'm sure we'll get into later. Like what does she do? Is she was she like
She's totally different than me, I can tell you that. Maybe that's why it's worked. I don't know. It's hard because we're not alike in any way, shape, or form. She's a total artist, doesn't go to the gym. She works out and stuff, but just totally different than me. Doesn't, I used to drink crazy amounts, excuse me, and just party and just do everything to the max. Sorry. Never understood moderation. I'm talking about me here.
yeah.
I still don't. She understands moderation and does things in moderation, and it doesn't jump in other than with her art, which is amazing. With 2 feet, I'm either all in or not interested. So kind of a long answer, but yeah, we're very different.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, that takes divorce and cheating and all that stuff is common enough in regular military. And even, I mean, me and all of my peers, none of us were combat vets. And even still, I mean, my marriage failed because of poor communication that led to infidelity and like it that was even on both of my deployments. I mean, guys, relationships were dropping left and right just from even being apart for 6 months or 7 months, which is such a short. term, like compared to like what you guys were deploying with and actually being at risk while you were deploying.
I'll
That's
get
mind
yeah,
blowing.
I'll give props to the women or the spouses or whatever, the ones that are staying home because it's not easy for them either. And the whole life is not easy. The military, first of all, when you're in a unit like the SEAL, any SEAL teams, any special operations unit, you're married to that unit. And you hear people say like, family first or God first or no, it's the unit first, and that's the way it has to be while you're there. And if it's not that way, people will sniff that out, and you won't be there that long. So it has demands of you that are not quite healthy for other aspects of your life. So, you do it as long as you can, and um, some guys do it longer than others, but then you move on.
Is that is that why you wound up getting out after about 10 years instead of sticking in for retirement?
I never saw myself as a retirement guy. I just didn't. I don't know why, but I didn't. I wasn't set up for it. I did everything I wanted to do. So after 3 deployments in Afghanistan, and I was about to get out anyway, my team leader said, "Hey, do you want to do one more deployment to Bosnia?" I said, "Yes." And he's like, "Then you can get out 2 weeks later." And I said, "Perfect." So I go to Bosnia. We get an intel package on this a-hole that had raped like 200 women and killed like 100 civilians. And we find him and we put our recce on him and we're watching him for a couple weeks. I mean, we know, how he takes his coffee and what kind of cigarettes he smokes. And then we finally get the go ahead to get him. And before the op, my team leader's like, "Hey, you want to be the primary prisoner handler?" And I was like, "Yes, I do." Which meant basically I'm on him and everybody's got my back. And we get the go ahead. We roll in there, and there was this weird ROE, rule of engagement, that said, he was having a party, and if he went inside of his house, we had to abort. We could only take him if he was outside of his house. So we roll up to his house. We're like 100 yards from his house, and the recce team's like, "He went inside," and we all kind of look at our OIC, and he's like, "Fuck it, we're going." So we went anyway, and we ripped that dude out. I ripped that dude out and turned him over to some other SEAL team and got out of the Navy 2 weeks later. So and in terms of Afghanistan, like it was Wild West days. So like I got done what I wanted to get done as a little kid, and it was time for me to move on.
Well, yeah, I want to be careful about this. I'm not like trying to drag you into war stories and stuff here, but like when you guys are doing like that, so I'll stay away from the Middle East stuff, but like in Bosnia, like when you're snatching that guy up, I mean, and you guys are sitting there and scoping him out for a couple of weeks, is that all remote and you guys are doing this stuff from a distance, or are you guys actually integrating in and floating around him?
Yeah, the latter. I don't want to give away
Okay.
too much, but basically we have people, in country living in, an apartment someplace pretty close, and they're watching him, and then you have other people that are just kind of on the assault team in another apartment, just kind of waiting, doing nothing.
Mhm.
And you're just gathering intel, they're passing it back, and then finally you get the go ahead to do it, and you plan it, and you take them out.
That's so wild. And just with the way that's how your career kind of wrapped up, like that's the whole literally you were in Bosnia wanting to do that, and that's
Yeah.
what dragged you into that unit.
Yeah, and I think that's one of the reasons why I never kind of looked back, or kicked myself in the ass for leaving. I left on my own accord, honorably discharged, didn't get shot or blown up in my prime, like 29 years old. And people are like, "Why?" And I would explain to them that, and they would understand it. But I had a lot of friends that got out and really, really regretted it. Either they got out before 9/11, so they have no time on the trigger, no wartime stuff, so they spent their whole SEAL career as a just training, and that really chaps their ass. Or they left for some other reason and they just want to go back in, and or you never find the same guys. So if you're in a SEAL team or any spec ops unit and you leave, you're never going to have those guys again. So just get that out of your head immediately. As soon as you can wrap your brain around that, the better. Because if you're searching for those quality of guys and gals to be surrounded with, you're going to be out of luck. You're lucky if you can you scoop up one or two or three of them, but to have dozens and dozens and dozens of guys around you that are just shit hot awesome dudes, it's special. And you don't know it's I didn't know it's special, it was special until I left. You don't appreciate it till you leave.
I guess, do you feel like that's because that, I mean, those were your formative years were spent surrounded by those people? Is that why
Yeah.
you almost weren't aware of it?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I grew up in the SEAL teams. It's a heck of a place to grow up in.
And I mean, that's interesting. I guess I know you can, or have known that you can go straight into the Navy and go to buds and stuff, but I guess, yeah, I have never
It's
thought about it like that. Like you wouldn't even be aware of almost the, uh, not that you're not thankful for what you have there, but like not even fully aware of the caliber of people that you're trying to buy
there's
because you're one of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of pros and cons to going in the way that I did. And there's pros and cons to the way the Navy does it. Special forces, you can't do that. You have to have a job, have an MOS, be in it, and then, go to their Q course or whatever it's called. SEAL teams isn't that way. They'll take anybody straight from high school as long as you have the right MOS or NEC code or whatever they call it now, but the right job. And on one side, there's some good for guys being in the Navy, seeing how the fleet works, seeing how the big Navy works, and then going into the SEAL teams. They probably appreciate the hell out of it because it's so much better. But they also have some bad habits, and they have some like ingrained military habits. And when I say military in that sense, I don't mean good, just sort of rule followers. Whereas SEALs are not really rule followers; they're principle followers. There's some rules that are written in blood that you have to follow and you should follow. And there's other rules that just, they may or may not make sense in the moment. And what makes more sense is to think about the principle of it. What's the principle that we're trying to do here? Are we trying to be fast? Are we trying to be slow and quiet? Are we trying to overwhelm them with, you know what I mean? Like um, so I'm just sort of going off on a tangent here, but I think one thing that separates SEALs from other units is their thinking on their feet and their principle based, not rule based.
And independent thinkers as opposed
Independent thinkers, yeah,
to
not
like,
definitely not robots.
yeah, and I don't think people realize that about the general military, like conventional military with like, yeah, you get told what to do with everything. Like, yeah, you might have the freedom to decide on a on a group level some of the details of what's going on, but most of that stuff, at least when you're, even an NCO and the conventional forces, is all it's mostly it does as it's told kind of stuff.
It's a giant force protecting freedom that has no freedom,
That's an incredible way to put that.
right? You
Oh
don't
yeah.
people that aren't in the military don't understand at all what it's like being in the military. You don't have any freedom, and you don't have like there's no timeouts. There's no, or at least we didn't have training timeouts. I guess they have training timeouts now. I don't know if they really use them, but the point is, it's a very interesting culture and work environment that is like no other. And yeah, there's nothing like the military.
And I know, I mean, that's people struggle with getting out anyways, and now you've touched on the fact, obviously you're on I feel like anyone listening here's Navy SEAL and I would hope that they would realize it's a different caliber of person. So but you've hinted on, yeah, these are unique people that you've been surrounded by in this environment that you've been in where everyone's fully committed, but also with the pace of life slowing down. I mean, I know when you and I talked offline a little bit, you did mention like because I had touched on the fact of, going down this list of things that I've seen that you've done in researching you and in your background a little bit, and even seeing or hearing other, not even necessarily just SEALs, other special operations guys or other special forces guys talking about or going down the list of things that they've accomplished after they get out. And you're like, okay, well, that makes sense. That's an ass kicker who got out and is kicking ass in every other place he goes to because he's, it's probably easy to him. And you were like, hey man, I struggled with that. And I mean, was it a little bit of both where it's the pace and not having the people? Was it struggling because now you're starting to process the shit that you've seen and been a part of?
Great question. First of all, my transition in a negative way didn't kick in until maybe like 10 years later. When I left the teams, I went right to a defense contracting company that was full of SEALs and SWAT guys and, Rangers and all kinds of guys. So it was like the same culture. I never left. I didn't leave Virginia Beach. That's where all the East Coast SEAL teams are. So I kind of had access to my guys. And then when I moved out west for that, got started getting into the nonprofit world, it was great, but that's when I started to like have transition issues. And I wasn't around the guys. I didn't have access to the guys. I didn't live next to them. And you get caught up with what's your identity. The SEAL teams was my identity, and that's gone. So who am I? And you just kind of feel lost. And I think, or at least I'll speak for myself. I spent a lot of time doing things and working in areas that I had no business doing or working in. So basically, I spent a lot of my life afterwards figuring out what I didn't want to do. And I'm finally starting to figure out now, like 21 years later, what I do want to do. So that part's been a struggle for me. It's been hard. It's been hasn't been easy, and I've been pretty down, in a couple of times over the last, say, 8 or 10 years where I, had suicidal thoughts and had friends that committed suicide, and I was working with a lot of people with suicide. I don't know if that, what rubbed off or, how much of the environment you kind of take in or I took in. But anyway, got into plant medicines, did that whole thing a bunch of times, several times, and that worked. We can talk about that. But there's a lot of things that can work, but you have to want to work. You have to want to change. And, whether it's equine therapy or recreational therapy or plant-based medicines or a therapist or, fishing or whatever it is, you got to find some way to heal yourself and fix yourself and decompress and, work through things.
Were you aware of the fact that like you mentioned, like almost like not knowing what you wanted to do when you grow up, right? Like, were you aware of that whole time, or was there something that flipped that switch where you're like, okay, I'm floundering a little bit, like this is why?
You mean when I was young, before I knew what I wanted to do?
I thought we like you.
It was just a movie. I mean,
Oh no, I mean like when you got out, like even now
yeah,
you mentioned like you were still trying to figure out almost like what you like to do and like what you
yeah,
want to do.
yeah.
So so that's what I was at. Like, were you aware of that? Or
Not at the time, no.
okay.
You just kind of you figure, you get a job in a cubicle and you tough it out for like a year or so, and you're like, and then you finally leave and you're like, wow, I am not set up to be in a cubicle. I know that now. And any amount of money is just it's not going to make it work. Not sustainable anyway. I mean, you can make good money and be miserable for some amount of time, and I've done that a lot. But it's not sustainable. It's not a good long-term approach.
Yeah, and I think if you're miserable and something like that, that's going to start to show somewhere. Even if it may not be in the workplace, it's going to start pouring over into personal either behavior or relationships, or it's not a good thing to try and inject yourself into a mold that you're not necessarily made for. Uh,
Yeah, I think it's we're all usually pretty good at some aspects of our life, and then we're not so good at other aspects of our life. But if you don't take care of those things and the weaker parts of you and the weaker aspects of your life, they will bleed into the good parts. You have to take care of your finances, and you have to take care of your health, and you have to take care of your mental health, and you probably ought to take care of relationships. You know what I mean? There's things that need work that you got to be willing to put the work into to stay healthy, to stay in the good.
Yeah. When as you started, because I know, I mean, you mentioned all sorts of stuff, get it from executive protection stuff into, and I know that's some of what you're doing today, but I know, and you even touched on it earlier, but in researching you too, that your first foot in the door into service outside of the military and contracting was through the Special Olympics, right? Was that the first like arena in the nonprofit space
That
and
was
that
the
kind
first nonprofit space. Yeah, I actually went out west for a nonprofit, which was an eco resort. It was like a 614,000 acre eco resort, and the nonprofit aspect of it was Mustangs. Saving America's Mustangs was the name of the nonprofit. And we had like 600 Mustangs out in this one pasture that we had to feed every day. And then there was like another 400 or 500 of them out in the Go Shoot Mountains. And this property was huge. I mean, it was like 40 miles wide. And I did that for a year. And that's what got me to get up to. So that was in Wells, Nevada. And I put my family up in Sun Valley, Idaho. Wells, Nevada is just literally truck stops and whorehouses. And
of.
so I wasn't going to put my family there. I put them up in Sun Valley, Idaho. And that's where the Higher Ground organization was. That's the organization that had the Special Olympics. It had two sides of it, Special Olympics side and then the military side. So I started in the Special Olympics side, and then I was on a chairlift with the executive director, and I was like, I'm thinking about leaving my job down there, and do you have anything? And she's like, well, yeah, you could take over the military department and run the whole military side. I was like, okay, awesome. So that was pretty cool. I wasn't a mental health professional. I have no training in mental health, but I was pretty quickly thrust into like leading group discussions and basically being a therapist or a therapist light. We did have mental health professionals on site and, during these camps that we would do. So if anything got too deep or we were out of our, uh, you know, shooting above our pay grade or above our pay grade, we would turn it over to the mental health professional. But good stuff, and really got to work with some great guys and gals, and learn a lot about the brain and a lot about psychology, and learn a lot about veterans with PTSD and TBI and MST.
Well, and that's because these were mostly conventional. I mean, definitely the women are conventional forces, but the guys were too, right? Because felt like I heard you mention somewhere that like that was eye-opening to you. Is this the same? That's the same
Yeah,
word.
yeah, and I didn't want to work with like the Navy SEAL Foundation, nothing against them, or Wounded Warrior Project, or any of like the super cool guy, big organizations. I wanted to work with the masses. I wanted to work with regular folks and guys and girls, not just in spec war, but all branches. And that's what it was like. So you didn't have to be, a Purple Heart or Bronze Star, or you didn't have to be anything to be in there. You just had to be a veteran, and you had to have either PTSD or TBI or been subjected to military sexual trauma. And so it was good. It was good, working with those people. And it was all kind of being sick of myself and sick of like just having SEAL friends and just, it was just kind of one big ball of change. I got some empathy, I got some humility, and I sort of just changed who I was and changed who I wanted to be, and it was a good thing. I needed it.
And it was just from helping facilitate like the experience of facilitating those experiences for other people and helping guide people through some of that stuff is what started to shift you in that direction.
Yeah, yeah. So here's an example. So on one of my first camps, we had this woman, big tatted up, lesbian woman, kind of like a what you would expect, like she'd be a part of a biker, like a dude's biker gang, right? Just big, rough, tough, tatted up face tats. And on Thursday, she's crying. She's just bawling over by herself in a corner. And I go over to her and I was like, "What's going on?" And the theme of the day was "I am valued." We had very specific content, very intentional content themes of the day. And the theme of that day was "I am valued." Anyway, so she's bawling and she's like, This is the first time in my life I've ever felt valued." And I was like, damn, like here's a 20 something year old woman who had military sexual trauma and treated poorly in the military and, done a bunch of things and just never had great support, family, friends, whatever, never felt valued. And I was like, damn, wow, like there's people on this planet that just don't feel like they have any value. And so it was nice to work with those people and help them and you know give them some skills, give them some insight, and give them some some recreation things that they would enjoy. We take them skiing or whitewater rafting or fly fishing or snowboarding or equine therapy, hiking through the mountains, all these things. Introduce them to things that they can do again and enjoy again and get back to who they are and get off the couch and get off the meds and lose some weight and meet some more people and, just basically be good, productive members of society again. And, that when they showed up, they weren't, they're isolating and they're zombies from taking all the VA meds and they're just not healthy and they're overweight and not eating right, not sleeping right, not working out. And, we want to change all those things.
That's I for you. I know that I mean, you touched on both of those organizations there. Were those things that had helped you, or was that just something that you came into because you had put your family up in Sun Valley?
I came into it, yeah, and right into a staff role. But I probably could have used the services myself. It probably would have made more sense for me to go through as a participant and then go into staff. But I got some help out of it, just being staff. Um, you know, it was good for me just being staff for me on top of everything else.
Okay. And that's also how, I mean, because you mentioned they had that military component. The other component of that was the Special Olympic stuff and working
Yeah,
with kids
exactly.
with Down syndrome.
Yeah, here's a funny story. This guy, he was actually older than me. He was like 60 years old. His name is Jerry. And I forget what his diagnosis was. It wasn't Down syndrome, but it's very similar to Down syndrome. And I would take him swimming. And after every lap, he'd be like, "How'd I do? How'd I do?" I'd be like, "Jerry, that was awesome, man. It was freaking fast and you were cutting through the water. You're looking good, bud." He's like, "All right, all right. Next lap. How'd I do? How'd I do?" So he goes to the Special Olympics regional championships and he places fourth. Now, a little background, there's a store in Sun Valley called what's it called? The Golden Nugget. Now I'm blanking on it. Gold Mine. It's called the Gold Mine. And everybody like there's a ton of rich people in that area, and they bring their stuff in, they give it away, and then like the working class people can buy really good stuff for pretty cheap, right? So everybody knows about the gold mine. So back to Jerry and his competition, he wins fourth place. And even Jerry knows that there's no such thing as fourth place. So he takes his fourth place ribbon and he like throws it and he's like, gold mine material.
Oh, no way. First of all, that's a great name for a business like that, but that's hilarious. It was funny, like with you asking or mentioning him asking, like, "Hey, how'd I do? How'd I look? How'd I look doing
Yeah.
it?" My middle sister, she just turned 18. She has Down syndrome, and she's super competitive. Has done Special Olympic stuff her whole life, basically, and she's first of all a huge shit talker, but she's very much so like she'll stop in the middle of a basketball game, like as she's running down the court and like look over to like make sure, hey, are you guys still watching me? Or you're not looking down at your phone or whatever. And it's funny. It reminded me it, just very similar, but that was your first exposure being around like spending time with people with disabilities.
I actually had a niece growing up that had Down syndrome from another brother, but we only got together a few times growing up, for whatever reason. So I had some exposure, but generally speaking, no, that was like the first exposure to the Special Olympics or the Paralympics. That was also pretty cool. I became a blind ski instructor, and there's only three levels, and I got my second level of adaptive ski instructor. And my first fully blind kid that was 16, he showed up, and he's like, "I just want to go fast." I'm like, "Oh, cool, I'm your man." But it was cool learning how to be a blind ski instructor. We went to Breckenridge, and there was a symposium, and I had to get blindfolded all the way through the lift line, and then up the chairlift, and then all the way down the mountain. And there's different ways to do it. You can have somebody ski right behind you and talk you through it and be like, "Okay, we're gonna make a left turn in three, two, one. All right, we're gonna make a right turn. All right, let's cheat a little bit left. We got some kids up coming up," and you just talk them down the mountain. Or some people like a bell. You can just ring a bell, they'll follow the bell. You can have headphones and have intercoms. Uh, you always have a signal that you would never hear on the mountain, which means fall down right now. You're about to ski off a cliff, you're about to ski into a 2-year old, like whatever, you need to fall down right now. And I would usually say like kayak and be like, kayak. And the kid would just fall down. But it was pretty cool. And, the trust involved. Imagine, I don't know if you ski, but
Yeah, I
imagine
do.
blind, you've skied blind.
Yeah, I was just up in Steamboat.
Awesome.
Yep.
Well, I got to hand it to you, man. The trust involved with having another human help you down the mountain is just huge. I don't know if I would do it. I don't know if I would have it. And the last thing I'd say is I got like seasick with my eyes closed or blindfolded. So, like if you can't hear the snow, sometimes you don't even really know how you're moving or if you're moving. And it was just kind of a weird feeling. So, anyway, props to you for doing it.
Yeah, it's fun. I do way better on steeper terrain because it is more you get more of that the actual tactile feeling of the
Yeah.
sense of direction of down. Like if it's I can ski or I can ski bike on double blacks. I can't ski on double blacks yet, but like if you get me on a green, sometimes I'll just tip over because I can't tell like which way's downhill. It's weird, but it's those headsets, dude, and like these opportunities. I didn't know any of this stuff existed until I was blind, but like that and the whitewater kayaking stuff have been it's huge, and so I hope you realize like the impact that you probably had on like that kid's life and all the other people that you were guiding, especially if it's people adapting or getting used to that stuff early on post injury from something or post illness, whatever got them there. I mean, those opportunities are a lifeline. But
It's pretty important for, inclusivity um, purposes to be adaptive and to have adaptive organizations. And like we had a sled hockey team or sled hockey events, right? So even if you got no legs, your spine doesn't work, we can strap you into a sled that has a couple skates on the bottom and short hockey sticks with spikes on the bottom so you can pull yourself, but you still have two hockey sticks to hit the puck with, and people can play hockey or basketball. And I guess I never thought of inclusivity um, before that job. And I think it's a pretty important thing. I think the word inclusivity it's gotten a bad rap lately because everybody's talking about DEI and DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion, or didn't earn it, however you want to phrase it.
yeah.
But the inclusivity part, I think, is pretty important. And, Paralympics, I think, is important. Special Olympics, I think, is important. So I'm down with those.
Yeah, I definitely agree with you. I think it's kind of gotten wrapped into a negative context almost because of everything else that's going on, but I don't know. I hopefully a lot of the bullshit gets filtered out and we can get back to it being just a normal term and not like a co-opted thing. But
Yeah.
as so you're, I mean, that seems like those were pretty formative experiences. And will you, before I want to move along here to you finding plant medicine, but I heard you speak to how prevalent you mentioned MST, military sexual trauma. I don't know how up to date you are on the stats of all that and the reality of all that, but can you try and put that into perspective for people listening?
Yeah, I don't know if the stats have changed. I assume they haven't, but apparently 1 in 100 guys and 1 in 5 women claim military sexual trauma. So not necessarily raped, but some type of misconduct, something occurred, and it's a big deal. I mean, I spoke to a guy who woke up and was being raped by his roommate in the Marine Corps. They were drinking and he woke up to that, and I was like, wow.
Wow.
I never even thought of that. I never, let alone heard someone tell me that. So those types of stories and conversations are obviously quite deep and strange and new. And I spoke to a woman who'd been raped 3 times by 3 completely different guys, 3 completely different circumstances. That blew my mind, and I was like, "What? Like, how do you trust guys?" And her answer was so simple, and it was just so quick. And her answer was, "Well, most guys aren't rapists." I was like, "Oh, okay. Well, geez, you've been raped 3 times. It's a tough one to kind of swallow." Um, but anyway, those things were, helped me and grew me and evolved me, and were things that I never would have experienced before. So it was good, deep stuff.
Yeah, that's such a strong, I don't know, that almost sounds corny saying strong. For her to have that perspective and to not us to to have processed that stuff to the point, or even just to be able to say that, it's a powerful thing for her to be able to, after all of that, to be able to still be like, look, that's not, most people aren't shitty. Um, wow.
Yeah. Yeah.
So along your path, I mean, is finding plant medicine and reaching that point where that's what you're searching for? Is that the kind of the next thing in the timeline here?
Yeah, I started just, having negative thoughts and suicidal ideations, and I had buddies that went, and I knew guys that went, and I heard good things, and I went down there and had good experiences myself. Um, I'll tell you a couple of the guys, if you want to hear their story. So basically there's ibogaine and 5-MeO-DMT. They're both DMT. The ibogaine is from the iboga plant, and it's like a powder. It's in a pill. You swallow it, and it's like a 10-hour experience. And it's very harsh. It'll never be a party drug. It'll never be abused because it's harsh. It's like mandatory therapy. You puke a lot. It's harsh. It's pretty cool though, because you're in a your brain is in a dream state, and you're fully aware and sober and yourself completely.
Did you
So,
go down to South America for this?
down to Mexico.
Okay.
So you can close your eyes, and you should have your eyes closed and have a eye thing on because it's better experience, and you can see like HD images. So with your eyes closed, you see HD quality images. It's crazy. So anyway, like, one guy's experience, he was suicidal. He was a force recon guy, and had been like suicidal since he was 12, and all this shit, father stuff and brother stuff, and just all this shit. Well, he gets into his experience, and this entity, call it God, call it your future wiser self, whatever, is showing him around this room. And in the room are posters on the wall. And all the posters on the wall are like coinciding with his shame and his guilt and his shit, basically. And this entity was ripping posters off the wall and saying, "You see this? See this shame that you felt since you were 12 years old? You don't need that anymore." And it would throw it on the ground, and it would take another poster off the wall and say, "You see this hurt? You see this when you hurt this person when you were 13? You don't need to hold on to that anymore." And it just went around the room, and it showed him all his baggage and ripped it off the wall and explained to him how he didn't need it anymore, and it wasn't helping him anymore. And the dude woke up and was like, I'm a changed man. Like I'm not suicidal. I just want to help other veterans. And that was a hell of an experience. Another
Were
guy,
you go ahead?
another SEAL was had a was married, had a side chick, loved them both, and got into his experience. And the entity was like, "You need to leave her," meaning the side chick. And he's like, "No." And it kept saying, "You need to leave her. You need to leave her." Finally, he's like, "Okay." And the presence or entity goes, "No, it has to be authentic." He goes, "You need to leave her." And he goes, "Fuck you." And the entity goes, "Okay." And picks him up and places him on an island of like despair with no hope. Like the hope is drained. It's just full of
What?
despair. Yeah. And then brings the side chick into his view and murders the side chick in various ways for like 6 straight hours. So he wakes up and he's like, I've got to leave the side chick. And he stops drinking. He was a heavy drinker, gets back with his wife, patches it up, and, happily ever after. So there's some pretty cool stories and some pretty cool experiences that happen. So that's Ibogaine. That's the first night. That's Friday. Saturday, you just chill, eat fruit or whatever, lay out in the sun. And then Sunday is the 5-MeO DMT. They call that the God molecule. Ibogaine, by the way, is called the Stern Father. 5-MeO DMT is the God molecule, which makes sense to me because I think I met God and I didn't even believe in God at the time. That one's different. That one's a powder that you smoke. You smoke it out of like a crack pipe looking thing, and
Nice.
it probably lasts about 7 to 10 minutes. And it is like if you ever done shrooms or acid, it's like those times a million. It's crazy. You're up into outer space and wherever the heck you go, and then you're back down and sober in like 10 minutes. It's crazy.
Does it feel, I guess with both of them, like you're the first one, what'd you say? It was like 10 hours and then
Yeah.
there it's 10 minutes. Is
Yeah.
there time dilation that goes on there or
There certainly can be. I've heard
okay.
stories of guys like living like like having 5 month long lives in that 10 minutes and being so sure that they lived this life and had got married and had, kids or just crazy timelines. That might be a part of it, or it might not. Every experience is different, and I did the 5-MeO 4 times, and each one was completely different. One time I felt love, like basically met God. It was just like this big ball of love and light, and I felt love to like my cellular level. And I woke up and I was like, it's all about love. And that's not me. That's not coming from the normal me.
Yeah.
Another time I felt just pure acceptance, like the first time I ever felt just completely accepted, pure acceptance. Everything is okay. You're okay. You're good. Another time I felt joy, like just pure joy. I never felt that before. And the fourth time was actually the third time, but the last time, the other experience was like a death and a rebirth experience, which was amazing because somebody that was suicidal, you didn't want to put anybody through that. So I kind of got to die and get reborn, and that was an amazing experience. If you have any trauma, if you haven't gone through what you need to go through, if you've been hiding from trauma, usually childhood stuff, I would suggest going to one of these things and doing ibogaine and getting that stuff worked through. And on the front end, you'll talk to like a therapist or a healer, some shaman type, Eastern medicine type person, and you'll talk to them for a couple weeks, and you'll be super intentional about it. They'll tell you don't show up with expectations, show up with intentions but not expectations. And you're like, well, what the hell does that mean? How do I not have expectations? And you'll work through that. And then on the back end, this one's important. I messed this up a couple times probably. You got to reintegrate properly. The reintegration process has to be a thing, and you got to think about it, and you got to do it, and you got to change some things. Because if you kind of have a bad life and you go away to one of these experiences and you have a total transformational experience, and then you go back to your bad life and bad influences and bad friends and bad relationships and bad everything else, it's not going to stick. It's not going to just magically make you better when your environment sucks. So you gotta get the backside correct as well, and you got to get that reintegration process dialed in as well.
Yeah, for you, I'm curious. I mean, that definitely, anytime that you need to change something like structurally in your life, like, yeah, obviously your environment plays a role in that. But for you, was it, I got a couple of questions here. Was that over 4 different visits down there that
Yeah,
okay.
spaced
And
over like a couple of several years.
wow. And so, like, you were down there because you were struggling with thoughts of suicide, that's why you kept going down there?
Yeah, I would go down there. I'd have an amazing experience. I'd get what I needed. I'd have a nice spark, and I'd go back. And then, after like 6 or 10 months, I would kind of, have the feelings again. It would kind of rub off, and I needed kind of like a tune-up. And I would go down there for a tune-up. And the last time I went down there, I haven't. That was probably 3, 4 years ago, and I haven't been back since. And everything's been good. But if I need another tune-up, I'll go again. Or I might go again just to go accompany friends that need to go that are kind of scared of doing it. Just kind of be a sober, sane, helpful person in the room.
Yeah, because I mean, it sounds like a very intimidating experience. I think, like, especially 10 hours, dude, is a long time to be if you're watching there. I mean, that dude's watching this chick that he loves get murdered over and over for
Yeah,
6 hours of that. Like, you're gonna pay the piper on whatever you've been hiding from. That's, oh my God, that sounds fucking horrible. But
it could be 10 years of therapy in like 10 hours.
yeah. Well, and there, I I can't remember if I've heard Ibogaine being talked about for treating substance abuse issues, but I have heard of ayahuasca being used for that. I mean,
Yeah,
they're
very similar.
okay. I mean, I think they're starting to get into the zeitgeist more and more. I mean, sometimes you talk about it and people haven't heard of them, but I think through people hearing these huge like breakthrough experiences like that, it's starting to get out there, and it's hopefully at one point or eventually it'll make it into the States. And I know they're starting to push for it. At least there was I don't know if he's still the governor, but he was the governor of Texas, at least has been pushing for it, along with some lawyers and stuff like that to at least get some clinical trials going.
They
And
do psilocybin, which is mushrooms, and 5-MeO-DMT in the States, and they also do ketamine, but they don't do ibogaine for some reason. I don't know why.
okay. I know I believe I've heard of the VA doing ketamine, but they do the psilocybin in 5-MeO at the
I don't think
VA?
they do. I think
Okay.
it's nonprofits that do that. I could
It's
be wrong though.
I get it's still federal, so that's probably, I guess, would be the issue with the VA, aside
Yeah.
from it being things moving slow. But so, I mean, you go from all that brings us up to a couple years ago. What That's around the time that everything happened with your son George, right?
Yeah, so 19 is when my son George got bacterial meningitis, and that sucked. He, let's see, it was like on a Friday, and he said, I got a really bad headache. We're like, okay. And so we make an appointment for the doctor on Monday or Tuesday, and then Saturday, like, or Sunday, I forget. He wakes up and he's like, my whole spine hurts. And we're like, what? What? So we take him to the hospital. They give him a epidural, and they're like, well, he doesn't have bacterial meningitis. So we're thinking, great, it's viral. Viral doesn't kill you. And then he just degrades, and he falls into a coma. He's like unconsciously screaming, to come to find out, because his intracranial pressure was so high, and he goes unconscious. He's unconscious for days, and like, he's not getting great care. He's not in the PICU. He should have been in the PICU. I'm like suctioning him every 10, 15 minutes. Like, my wife and I are the only one in the room most of the time. And then finally, on like a Friday, I don't really know why, but I just kind of felt something was wrong. I stood up out of the little tiny bed we were on and a little couch we were sharing. And I stood over him and I looked over and his respirations were zero. And and I could tell he was trying to breathe. He just couldn't breathe. His face was full of fluid, his mouth, mouth and nose full of fluid. And I started to like squeeze his cheeks and squeeze some fluid out. I turned him on his side, and I was like, do I do rescue breathing and push all this liquid down into his lungs? What do I do? Alarms start going off. The hospital, code blue, go to room, whatever, and they start running.
Jesus.
And they get in there and they're kind of messing around with the ambu bag. And I was like, hurry up. He's turning blue. He's literally turning blue. They finally got an ambu bag in him and, got some breaths into him. My first thought was like, well, if he dies, I die. And then pretty quickly, another thought was like, nah, you got another son. He needs you. Knock that off. So that was the start of like a 51-day ride in the hospital. He was in a coma for like a week and a half. Came out of the coma. None of his limbs worked. He could blink, so we'd be like, all right, give us one blink for yes or two blinks for no. And then finally his arm started to work a little bit. So we printed out an alphabet and I would like hold his arm and he would like spell stuff out. The first thing he spelled out was, "Can I have a sandwich?" And
How
then
old was he at this
he
point?
was 11.
Okay.
Yeah. And the second thing he spelled out letter by letter. And again, you heard about my wife, how we're
Yeah.
totally different. He said to my wife, he spelled out letter by letter, "You and dad complete each other." I was like, holy shit. That's like some Jerry Maguire shit there.
An
Like
11-year-old.
11-year-old coming out of death, figuring out that
Wow.
my wife and I make a great team. So, you know, there's a lot to unpack there, but I have two sons. One of them isn't like a SEAL. Like the older one is like a SEAL. He's like me. He might be a SEAL. I don't know. He's in college. And the younger one, George, that one, is not like me. And it was a little bit whiny and just wasn't really into working out and just wasn't really my type. And after that experience, I grew to appreciate him and excuse me, and love him and have gratitude for him. So I didn't really understand gratitude. It's funny, we taught it at Higher Ground, but I didn't really understand it myself until I almost lost that son. So, and now we're tight. So that experience brought us tighter together, smartened me up, got me, slapped me silly, and now he's doing great. He's crushing life. He's like totally recovered.
Does anyone know? I don't, how did he, I guess I don't know how anyone gets bacterial meningitis. Is it from an open wound
Yeah,
or?
they don't really know. It somehow crosses the blood-brain barrier and gets into your cerebral spinal fluid or your cord, your spinal cord, and then it just wreaks havoc and increases pressure in the brain. I mean, he had intracranial pressure that was just crazy. They had to drill a hole in his skull and drain it. He had a PICC line in his neck. He had a catheter in his penis. He had a G tube. He had a trach. I mean, he had a tube in every
Jeez.
single orifice that you could possibly have it. Speaking of the Foley catheter in his penis, when he came out of his coma and none of his limbs were working, and we weren't sure if he was brain dead, I had a moment where I knew that he wasn't brain dead, and it was perfect. He basically he like got wide eyes. He looked at me, and then he looked down, where his penis would be underneath blankets and stuff, and then looked back at me, and I was like, "Yes, you have a tube in your penis." And he sort of got wide eye, and then and then started crying, and I was like, "Thank God he knows." He's got the brain power to understand he's got a tube in his dick and he doesn't like it, and I just told and I told him what it was, and he
Yeah.
acknowledged it. So that was wonderful, because he could have been brain dead. 50% of his cerebellum was destroyed. A part of his brain stem was destroyed. I mean, his intracranial pressure was just off the charts for like weeks. They were giving him, salt. They would stop the salt. They'd start the salt. The brain drain was just constantly draining. That's gross and terrible in itself. They drill a hole in your skull and then they put a straw in that's like 4.5 inches long, and they put it down into, quote, like the non-working part of the brain. It's like, what part of the brain is non-working and can take that 5 inch straw? Well, anyway, he needed it, and yeah, so he's good now. It was a big ordeal, and it's over now.
Well, what's the deal? I mean, with him not getting the care that it sounds like there
We
was some neglect going on there.
There really was. We could have sued the hospital. The doctors told us to sue the hospital. The hospital chaplain said you need to sue the hospital. Everybody said basically if you don't sue the hospital, changes are not made, and changes are made when people sue them. So, we talked to a lawyer, but I've never sued anybody. My wife has never sued anybody. We're not the suing types, and we didn't do it. Maybe if he didn't turn out okay, um, but yeah, they were terrible. They were just reactive. They were never, I mean, he had to die in my hands for them to put him in the PICU. Um, it was a shit show, but a lot of good came out of it. Like I talked about, our relationship is better. My gratitude for him is better, and we're just tight.
Yeah. Well, and if uh, what you said that was 2019, so he's getting
Yeah.
close to being I guess he's getting close to finishing high school. Yeah.
Yeah, he's 17. He's in 11th grade. He's going to college as well. He's going to leave high school with an associate's degree in business. He's a
Jeez.
he's a stud.
He's killing it, dude.
Yeah.
That's awesome. I
Yeah.
What was timeline wise for him? I mean, that road back after all of that. I know you said he was in the hospital for 51 days, but I mean, what was the rehab process like
Yeah,
from
we
all
went
that?
to uh we went to inpatient rehab in Salt Lake City, and we had no idea if we were going to be there for months or years, and he got out of there pretty quick. He learned to brush his teeth and walk again and talk without the trachea, the trach tube in, and he had to learn everything again, and his balance was shit. His cerebellum is what was destroyed, and that's when we drink and we get wobbly, the reason why we're wobbly is because that cerebellum is affected, and his cerebellum was affected. So he was super shaky, and but I just worked with him. I just, throwing a ball, catching a ball, boxing gloves, hitting mitts, catching a football. One day I just threw him a slant pass for like an hour until he caught it, and we were like, yes.
That's so cool. I guess I'm assuming he was into sports before that. If he was he able to return to sports?
He was a little bit into sports. He was into soccer, nothing, no, no contact sports. But no, he didn't get back into sports. But he's into the gym now, so he loves the gym. Once he turned like 15, I made him go to the gym, and within just within a short amount of time, he's like, "Dad, you don't have to make me go to the gym anymore. I want to go to the gym." I'm like,
Now he's a
"Yes,
gym rat now. Yeah.
yeah."
That's cool, man. Well, what else? I know you're on the market for some work right now. I know you're out there to speak. What else do you have going on? What else have I not touched on here?
I'm gonna put together weekend experiences. I've been a participant in some of these weekend experiences, and now I want to offer them and be staff and make a business of it. So for just one example, imagine a hunt trip. So you go to this amazing facility, you show up on a Friday, we have a dinner, we have some content, we get up in the morning, we work out, we go over weapon safety. I teach everybody, we get on the pistol, we get on a shotgun, we get on a rifle, and then maybe, we eat lunch, and then we go on a hunt. And the animals, some of these facilities have every animal you can imagine, other than like lions, but zebras and wildebeests and waterbuck and gemsbuck and fallow deer and whitetail deer and moose and elk and just everything. So anyway, put together some weekend experiences. I want to do some dirt bike ones as well. Get out in the desert, dirt biking, do skills on the way, pack, camp out there, and bring our food and make a weekend of it. So not only keynotes, kind of like 1 hour talks. weekend experiences as well.
All kind of outdoorsy, rugged, getting out
Absolutely.
there kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And I'll probably have some levels to it. I've started to write up some different levels, meaning like level one is just familiarization with the pistol, rifle, shotgun, and then hand to hand, get some hand to hand in there as well, and then just build off that. Basically just man training stuff, working out,
Yeah.
shooting, just how to take care of yourself. Survival is another thing that I've taught some survival classes. And I think when I grew up and I thought of survival, I thought I would be alone and I would be in the desert alone or on some island alone. And that's just stuff you kind of grow up with, but that's not realistic. I think what is realistic, and we might see in our lifetime, hopefully not, where we're in a survival situation, but there's thousands of people around. Like,
Yeah.
like what then? It's totally different. Like you surviving on a desert island alone is not the same conversation as you surviving with 100,000 people that just ran out of food. So that's a whole different conversation that gets into hand to hand, pistol, rifle, shotgun, defending what is yours, making water, making food, things like that.
Yeah. I definitely agree with you that I do hope it doesn't happen, but I think that is a very real possibility of some, even, if it wasn't the whole country, at least being some localized areas where that does become a reality. And
Yeah,
that's,
supply chain breaking down, grocery stores no longer getting groceries. I mean, I think we're going to see that,
yeah,
and people need to plan for it.
I mean, we're
And
in a cold war right now. Like that is turning less and less cold, it seems like
yeah,
slowly. So I definitely,
and you can go too far with it. You can be a quote unquote prepper freak, or you can take it too far. But having pistol, rifle, shotgun, know how to use them all, have the right ammo, be safe with them, have some body armor, have a backpack full of stuff in case you need to leave. There's kind of two thoughts, or there's two, ways to go about it. And one is like castling or building up your castle, and the other is like survivalist. Well,
and having skills
yeah,
as
you might
opposed
have
to,
to
yeah.
leave. I mean, there might be a hurricane or a tornado or a riot or whatever, and you might have to leave. So what then? Then you got to load up your truck or whatever you got and take the stuff to survive with you. So I think everybody should have a backpack, a small backpack that's going to keep you alive for a weekend, a big backpack that could feasibly keep you alive for a month. Get some water filtration in there, different sizes of water filtration. Like for $20, you can get a straw and just, one of those life straws, and you can
Yeah.
you can just drink out of a dirty puddle, um, if you had to. And then there's other devices that are, pumps, and you can pump them into an Nalgene or pump them into a bladder. And there's all types of sizes and you know put throughs or throughput. But anyway, water is important, obviously. Food, not so much. We think, I fast, we can fast for days and be fine, weeks and be fine, but you're not going along without water. So I think water filtration is muy importante.
Yeah, I mean, you'll die in days.
Yeah.
Well, have you established a company yet? Do you have a website?
I've got a website. I've done nothing with it. I'm sort of a mess, social media wise. And it's because I just haven't put myself out there. I haven't jumped in with 2 feet. Um, it's kind of weird. It's one of the strange times in my life and places in my life where I haven't jumped in with 2 feet. Maybe there's some imposter syndrome going on there. I don't know, but um, I think I need to do it because I've thoroughly I've done a lot of industries and had a lot of jobs and been in a lot of situations. And what I've come to find out is I really just need to be working for myself, doing my own thing, answering to myself, and I'm 49 years old and I'm finally figuring it out.
That's what it's all about, man. You're growing or continuing to grow. Obviously, there's been a lot of growth along the way, but
Yeah.
where else, if people want you to speak, where should they go?
I'll give them my website because sooner than later it'll be up and running, and that's pretty easy to remember. It's Monty at montyheath.com. Or just, the website is montyheath.com. And that's where they can find me. I'll get that rolling sooner than later, and I'll be ready to come and speak. I I can speak about a lot of things and kind of go deep on, a good number of things. I think what I haven't, it's taken me a while to figure out what people want to hear, and I don't
Yeah.
know what, and I didn't know what they wanted to hear. I can talk about all these different subjects, but how do I provide the most value to the people in the room? So usually I tailor my speech to the people in the room, but I'm just about done with like I don't want to say canned speech, but like a 45-minute speech that doesn't change. And I think if you're into public speaking, you need to have that, just a 45-minute speech ready to go that doesn't have to be tailored, and it has good value. Say, for example, discipline, resilience, and achieving ridiculous goals. Like that's the first one that I've been writing to. So those will be my main points of the talk.
I guess is that are those the three areas that you feel like are what people have wanted from you most when you talk about trying to figure out exactly what to speak to?
Yes, and I think people need it. People need to hear about discipline. People need to hear about resilience, and people need to hear about people achieving ridiculous goals, because everybody can do it. Everybody can muster up the discipline. Everybody can have the resilience to stay on track or to get back on track. And everybody can achieve ridiculous goals. It just takes a lot of time and effort. And, there's no secret to it. There's no shortcut. There's no hacks. It's just, it's one step at a time. How do you climb Mount Everest? Literally one step at a time. How do you build the pyramids? Like one block at a time. How do you eat a horse? Like one bite at a time. So I think people just need to hear that, see it, and see stories about it, see success stories, and have them take a look at why they haven't chased their dreams and why they are held back. And spoiler alert, it's the person in the mirror. It's only the person in the mirror that's holding you back. There's no, it's not because somebody else is a billionaire. It's not because somebody else is super successful. It's because of you and your choices and your decisions and your behavior. And the sooner we figure that out, the sooner we can get on track to, chasing down our potential.
Yeah, and I think what you're saying with people, specifically with people hearing the stories of that actually happening, I think is important because unless you're lying to yourself, like when you're that person that's like, oh, how do I do that? It's like, well, stop being lazy and fucking do it. Like
Yeah.
you just need to hear that the context of someone else doing that lights that fire under you because some people can't pull that out of themselves. So
I'm
that's
I'm
awesome.
glad you said that though, in terms of because you do know. We know what's good. We know what's bad. We know what's helpful to us. We know what's not helpful to us. We just don't always listen to it. We just don't always listen to that voice, but it's correct. If you listen, if you just sit on the end of your bed for 1 minute and ask yourself a question, you're going to get the answer and it's going to be right, but you probably won't like it. Um, but that's, tough. I mean, nothing nothing in the comfort zone is worthwhile, right? All growth and evolving and changing and getting better involves being uncomfortable. It just does. So the sooner people can realize that, being uncomfortable means you're doing it right, and that's where you need to be, and not to shy away from it and to stay there, the faster they'll progress.
Well, and then you become more comfortable with being uncomfortable and more, yes, you're still uncomfortable, but that's a place that you're familiar with and a place that you can thrive in and that you will thrive out of.
Yeah.
And that's
Yeah.
awesome, man. So
There's no
what? Go
no
ahead.
growth in the comfort zone.
Yeah. Well, so we got montyheath.com. Got a new business, hopefully, that's coming out soon. Hopefully some people reach out to you to speak. You got anything else that you want to plug?
No, just help people out when you can. If you've got a job and people are trying to raise money for some causes, some good nonprofits, help them out. Do what you can. A good nonprofit, by the way, is spending their money 75% or better on the programming. So, like at one point, Wounded Warrior Project was down to like 63%. So they were wasting like 47%, and that's unacceptable. So, if you want to look at different nonprofits, you can go to GuideStar. What's the other one? GuideStar. I forget the other one, but you can look at nonprofits and see what their numbers are, and give appropriately. But yeah, the only thing I want to say is just try to help people. If you've never helped somebody wanting nothing in return and expecting nothing in return, but just wanted to help them, and then you did, the feeling you get is very unique. It's super unique and it's super fulfilling, and you don't get it elsewhere. You don't get it, you don't get it by getting a pump and looking at the pump in the mirror. You don't get it by getting a compliment from somebody. Um, it's a special feeling when you help somebody. Excuse me, when you help somebody and you literally want nothing in return. So that's what I would say.
And I think, again, underlining the not expecting something in return is something about that, doing it from a genuine place of just wanting to help. That is where that, for whatever reason, where that reward comes from, and where that feel good feeling comes from, and where you getting something out of it actually does happen.
Yeah.
But
And so if you're a veteran or if you're somebody that's wounded and you can't do what you used to do, I would, geez, I'm half choking here for some reason. I would suggest find a way to teach somebody. So even if you can't fly fish the way you used to, or ski the way you used to, or ride dirt bikes the way you used to, you can take a beginner and show them the basics, the fundamentals, and teach them that new sport and watch them thrive in that new sport. And it's amazing. So if you haven't thought about donating your time and instructing in one of those areas or finding a job in one of those areas, I would highly suggest you do it. Especially if you're struggling, especially if if you don't have the meaning, if you don't have the identity that you used to have, you're feeling bad, you're feeling useless, you're feeling like worthless, you can't do what you used to do. Well, you can show somebody your passion and teach somebody your passion, and that'll be another feeling that'll be very unique and very fulfilling and wonderful, and give you meaning and give you purpose. Humans do not do well without meaning and purpose. So if you're looking for it, that might be one way to find it.
definitely. And with that, like if you're not able to do the things that you were used to be able to do, a lot of times shifting that perspective to yes, I can. You have to do it differently. It's not going to be the same, but being okay with it, learning to do it in that different way, or taking what you still can do, I think is, speaking from my own experience with that stuff is
Yeah,
huge.
let me ask you a question. So you do jujitsu.
Hmm.
Did you do it when you had sight?
No,
Okay.
I wrestled in
Okay.
high school, but
I
yeah,
I would imagine that when you start and you're not touching each other, you've got nothing. You're completely lost. But the moment I grab your neck and grab a wrist, or you do the same to me, I would imagine it feels pretty natural for you, and I would imagine you're pretty damn good at it.
it does, and that's actually like I've competed in a couple tournaments. I'm doing another one here in April. It's against people without any disabilities, and that's how they adapt it. Is we start, if it's gi, we start sleeve and collar. They get it too, even though they can see. And so I don't like if we scramble and disconnect in a scramble, they'll let it happen. But like they won't just if someone tries to detach from me to like sneak up to go around me, then like that's yeah, I'm fucked, and they'll stop that. But
But when you're in that clinch and when you're tight with, side control, guard, mount, whatever, I would imagine you're not that disadvantaged.
I don't think it is. Once you're on the ground, I don't think it's a disadvantage at all. It's
Yeah.
hard. Getting takedowns can be hard, but again, you can always pull guard. And that's not hard because I don't have to know where your legs are. But yeah, really, I don't think it's a big disadvantage. It's been really, really neat. Yeah, man.
About that. I'm losing your eyesight is no joke. Whether it happens through time or um, some type of hardship. I would imagine people would love to hear you talk about jujitsu specifically and how, you're doing well and and you don't feel like it's much of a disadvantage.
I try when I'm around other people with disabilities, whether it's blindness or not, or if I have a chance to talk on any of that stuff, the skiing or rock climbing or whitewater kayaking or just taking the chance on trying to do those things, even though it's terrifying. Like you said, trying to trust someone that I've never met before until today, and now we're skiing down a black diamond. Like that's scary, but like you either lean into that and accept that risk, or you sit at home and do nothing. And I
Yeah.
mean, you got to pick your battles there. And I think that's a people part of the disabilities. I guess the struggling around disabilities, and especially when they are acquired later on in life, is that thought that, okay, well, now I can't do that stuff. And that's why I say, like, yeah, you can. You have to accept it. It's going to be a little different. Yeah, I can't go ski by myself, but I can ski if I have a radio in my ear and someone's skiing behind me. And I don't know. It's just,
I love that. I love your mentality. And what I'm not hearing is the victimhood mentality. And that's the worst. It's the worst when somebody is fully invested that they are a victim and, the world is to blame, somebody else is to blame. Everything sucks. It's woe is me, and it's a downward spiral. And you could spiral down to suicide,
yeah,
or you could have what you have, and that is a can-do attitude, not a victimhood mentality. And so I think it's wonderful, and I hope a lot of people hear it because I know they're going to be inspired by it.
that's the hope. And that the talking about the suicide stuff, keeps someone else from going down that path because that was a lapse in judgment that I had. And you realize coming out on the other side of that, like things can and will get better, but you have to, uh, just like with all these last couple of things that we've talked about, you have to do the work and you have to choose to do the work. And, we have agency in all of these things. And it's not going to be easy. Again, coming back to the discomfort thing, but it gets easier with time. But everyone's been through shit. You went through shit in the SEALs, you went through shit after the SEALs, your families, you've been gone through all this stuff. Everyone has their stuff that they're dealing with and going through. And so that having that pity party for yourself in the moment initially is normal, but you will, like you said, that's dangerous. That's a dangerous place to be in, and you have to pull yourself out of it.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah,
but
it's a short-term thing. I think pity in general is a short-term thing. Like when there's the death in the family, when a wife loses her husband or something, like you can have pity, they might want to be pitied for a short bit of time, but then sooner or later they're going to come out of that and say, I don't want your pity. Don't give me your pity. Don't treat me like that. I just want to get my life back. So pity in general, I think is good in the short term and can be necessary in the short term, but it's not a place to stay.
no, it's a nothing. No good will come out of staying there. But I think this is a great place to finish this thing up. Monty, thanks for coming on. Thanks for taking the time, for being willing to talk about all this stuff. People need to hear these conversations, and you said a lot of things that are impactful, that are direct, that people need to hear, but also shared some experiences that people can hopefully either realize maybe this is a new avenue for me, either to get help or to find purpose again, or just to make a change in their life. So thank you.
Yeah, man. Thanks for having me, and I love what you're doing, and you are inspirational to me, and I hope you make a lot of podcasts.
Thanks, man. And thanks everyone at home for listening to another episode of Going In Blind. Remember, if you haven't already, please take a second to rate and review the show wherever you listened, and then share this thing around.